Welcome to the Future of Ground Transportation podcast, where we discuss the exciting innovations that lie ahead for organizational ground transportation. Each episode, we cover topics tailored to those resolving transportation-related challenges and provide tips, tools, and trends that will inspire you to stay ahead of the curve. And now, here's your host, Daniel Perez.
Welcome of the Future of Ground Transportation. Today we have a special guest, David, mostly known for Nemo and Neal, Chief of Design at Mozee. David, thank you so much for joining our podcast tonight.
Yeah, good to be here.
Yeah, super excited to hear about your story about the autonomous vehicles and particular autonomous shuttles. So tell us a little bit of how you guys started in this industry and how you guys started at Mozee.
Sure. Little bit of backstory is I came from a company known as Local Motors that started in 2008. I was known for vehicle innovation to their online community. They hired me in 2014, and we actually started the Autonomy program in late 2015, early 2016 with a co-creation project. So that actually came from the efforts from this online community. As such, I worked really hard with that program, and in 2018 was made the head designer for the second version of that, which we called the Olli 2.0. And we thought about this space, the autonomous shuttle space, in a lot of ways that we hadn't seen anyone at the time really think about. And we thought of it less as a automotive development project and more of a mobile architectural space or a space for experiences. And that really resonated with a lot of the early adopters in 2018 when autonomy was getting a lot more press at the time. As such, we were one of the main vehicles, autonomous vehicle showcase at CES that year and the following 2 years. But unfortunately, when COVID hit, Local Motors, being a startup, was not able to get enough funding to continue, and shortly after it had closed. Fast forward a couple of years, I meet the CEO of Mozee, a gentleman named Sean Tackertel, who's a software engineer, and we meet through networking in the industry and things like that. And he's saying that, I'm writing code and developing this software for autonomous vehicles. I'm like, well, I design autonomous vehicles. And that first conversation lasted like 3.5 hours. Just he immediately understood all the things that I was trying to do with this type of vehicle. And luckily, right around that same time, the assets and the IP for the Olli product specifically became available. One of my old former R&D engineers, a guy named Adam, with his company called Additive Mobility, he purchased that IP. I introduced him to Sean. We all started working together. And so it was great because now we had the software side, which Local Motors never had control over. It was always outsourced for the software side. But well, now we had that. We're fully vertically integrated with a really, really great product. So that was around late 2022 when I met Sean and all of this kind of started. And he hired me as a freelance through an agency I was working at called Motor Supplied Innovations. And eventually he's like, well, I don't know if I need to work with this whole agency. Let me see if I can just work with Nemo. And he brought me on full-time as chief of design last September. And since then, it's just been a whirlwind of activity with working with the different cities and seeing all the different needs that they want. Talking with like sports agencies, talking with commercial developers that want our vehicles to make their commercial developments, more relevant for the future and stuff like that. City planners and things like that, and the ideas they have. So it's been really awesome to see the positive enthusiasm around the product that to me is, kind of old. I developed it 6-7 years ago.
Got it. So David, for a little bit of context for all the listeners, especially for folks that are either that they operate buses or for folks that are in the transit agency sector. Let's give a little bit of context of how the vehicle actually operates. What are the pros and cons? Are you guys using cameras to sort of dictate the movement of the vehicle? If you could just dumb it down, like
there's a lot to unpack with it when you talk about how this works. Let me give you some framework so we can level set as to where we as Mozee see the value in this. Is when you look at what mobility, especially in North America and suburban sprawl, we look at mobility in this kind of context. There's a couple different things that pop up, but fundamentally these cities are stuck in a transportation trap to where they're either spending large amounts of capital on things like light rail, billions of dollars per mile kind of thing, and then it's fixed and it's rigid and it doesn't change, and they're committed to it, right? Or they're looking at these very futuristic new technologies that are very novel, but they don't necessarily solve the congestion problems, or they don't really solve the ability to make mobility more accessible to a greater range of people. So when we looked at that, one of the things that we realized is there's definitely a niche for the first mile, last mile, and to take a vehicle that was the size of a regular vehicle, by which I mean like the footprint of like a mid-sized sedan, like a Honda Civic, fit more people in there and move them around efficiently on their shorter trips, just in their main communities. And so that's where we came up with the idea of something known as modular agile transit, and then also bringing community back to the cities and suburban cities all across America. A lot of times you hear people talk about how mobile phones bring us together and have given us connectivity, but it has also made us so distant from each other. And what we've tried to do is bake that into the mobility process to bring back that sense of community. In addition to that, when you talk to a lot of end users and you ask them to describe something like mass transit, rarely the words that you hear being said about things like buses and trains and stuff like that. And I say rarely because it's not always, but it's like clean, friendly, or smart. And so we figured with the solution that we're putting forth, if we can solve for those things and then learn the efficiency part on the tail end, that's definitely a good place to start. Now, as such, to your question with regard to the type of sensors and things that we utilize for the vehicle, typically in autonomy, we talk about LiDAR. That tends to be the main sensor that is doing a lot of the perception stack. We don't use any LiDAR. We are camera based, and we have a self-learning vision algorithm. And in addition to that, for some redundancy and to help us in things like inclement weather, we also use infrared and radar. And so that's our sort of redundancy in our perception stack. We also utilize that on the inside of the vehicle, so we can be able to determine, if people are, especially in the nightlife situation, prevent things like bio incidents, as we like to say, but people have a little too much fun, or in the case of sporting events, potential aggressive issues with rival people who are rooting for rival teams and things like that. But the point is trying to bring back safety into mass transit through the software and technology that we've been developing. In addition to that, we also have our own fleet operations that do something called dynamic fixed routing, which allows for people to be picked up in a zone rather than at a specific bus stop. And then the route will optimize based on peak times, off-peak times, traffic situations, emergency situations, things like that.
Got it. And as far as the recalls, and so for example, I know that with Waymo, as far as the the most concerns that I seen was like low speed crashes, erotic driving, software issues. Like how do you guys are navigating the ropes to sort of penetrate into the market?
That's a great question, and it's definitely one that we've spent a considerable amount of time thinking about. So, in reading some of the reports that we've gotten, with Waymo being definitely on the list of reports that we're keeping an eye on, because they are definitely putting down the most mileage. One of the things that we notice is things like unprotected left turns seems to be pretty tricky with a lot of these different companies, and I totally understand why that is. It's tricky for humans as well, right? Um, what we realize is that we not only have the burden of trying to be better than the human in driving in order to achieve the type of results that the technology is promising, but we also need to understand how people would react in those situations. And so we train all of our we train our machine learning algorithm on a lot of camera data, petabytes of data, so we can better understand human drivers and react in accordance to that, rather than hard coding various different incidents and hard coding certain object detection and things like that. So the algorithm is, as we're in testing and as we're letting it consume more and more data, it's learning better ways to handle situations that you can't account for and hard code for. Plus, that's not scalable, right? And so our philosophy is the more realistic the situations that the machine learning algorithm encounters, the better it could be prepared to handle those once it's deployed. And so far, we've seen great results, both in real testing and in virtual testing.
Got it. And as far as the mindset of the end user about using autonomous shuttles, like what are your current sort of feedback from riders, from corporations, from public agencies, from states, right? Probably from DOT as well.
Yeah.
Or from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
Good old NHTSA. So here's what's interesting is, even including DOT NHTSA, generally there's a positive sort of angle towards all of this, right? Our problem is not in the regulatory. Our problem is not in public perception. It's almost universally enthusiastic and anticipatory towards what kind of future this could provide, even with NHTSA. Now, obviously, their job is to be overly cautious and stuff like that. So they have been very good at communicating what it is that they're actually concerned with as we roll out these technologies, and to our benefit, because we're learning exactly what it is that the letter of the law requires in order for us to succeed. Now, what's really funny, I smiled when you mentioned end users. I did a fair amount of like case studies with my team back at Local Motors, and end user studies, and of multiple different demographics. It was a pretty good sample size. And what was really, really cool is like they liked it back then, but they still weren't sure, and they were kind of scared. And here recently, since I would say about late 2023, been kind of reactivating that, early 2024, reactivating some of that same sort of user study and stuff like that. And what we're finding is the adoption rate is much, much higher. And there's a big kind of wave of acceptance for these new technologies, because I think people, especially over COVID, wanted to see, us not only get back to normal, but what does the future hold? How can we make things like really, really interesting and fix the problems that we kind of were a little complacent about before? And so the cities seem to feel that way. The end users that we talk to seem to feel that way. Various different supply chain and development partners are really interested in that kind of outlook. And I would say that was a pleasant surprise, knowing what I knew in 2018, where people are a little standoffish, enthusiastic, sure, but standoffish of, I don't know if I want to ride with something, don't have a driver. Nowadays, I would also say that like some of the competitors or tertiary competitors that are out there have done a great job of paving the road, of getting the mileage out there, developing the technology and developing the perception that these things are on the road. You barely notice them, which is a good thing. So that means they must be doing well, right? They've done a great job of paving that road. And we just want to take that to the next step with a slightly different kind of flavor to it.
Got it. And David, as far as the safety and reliability for these autonomous shuttles, what comes to your top of mind? Because obviously safety is probably the number one concern that I'm assuming.
Well, it should be. It should be.
So what comes to your top of mind when it comes to safety and reliability for this?
Well, from our standpoint, that's part of the reason why we wanted to go for the low speed application first and the first mile, last mile application. Is because we're serving smaller areas. We're not on, main thoroughfares and arterials as much as we can help it. We're also in various different areas that have more controlled transit capability, something like an entertainment district, something like resorts, things like that. Even in so much as corporate campuses, airports, things like that. We have the ability to work with them and meet their needs and still be providing a pretty massive service from the perception experience side of things as well. So when I say that safety is the most important thing, we often keep it a mission statement here in the office is that we want to be the safest vehicles on the road when we're fully up and deployed. Even in so much as beyond what is required of us. For low speed, don't have to have seat belts, but we do have them in there. We do want to make sure that they work according to the requirements for a standard much, much higher than what's required. Yeah. And so these types of things, typically called due care items, we put them as primary targets on our development list.
Got it. And as far as, and how many passengers are normally the capacity for this shuttles?
So our shuttles, like I mentioned, is like about the size of a mid-sized sedan, right? So the footprint's not very big, but in seated, we can seat 8 people very comfortably and securely. And then we have room for standing passengers, including the ability for them to, have grab rails and things like that.
So how many people in total do you know? If it's
about 8 to 12. Yeah. So you can do 8 seated, 4 standing.
Okay.
And the way we see it, and the reason why we derived that number as sort of a target is we looked at reports from public transit nationwide. And I'll just use our local public transit as an example because it's the most recent reports. They have buses that seat like 42 people is the average size. They reported with their own numbers that the average ridership on a 42 passenger bus is only 5 people. And that's from their numbers. And to me, that's a gross inefficiency that the burden for taxpayers to take on, in addition to these buses, being out there clogging up the streets empty, all the burden that comes with that. And they're off of the road because of maintenance for more than a month per year. So these are all like pretty gross, massive inefficiencies that we feel that we can make these buses more efficient by them transporting more passengers longer distances. And then we do a hub and spoke kind of micro route type of thing. And then we're disseminating people. And even if we're only hauling 3-4 people, we are more percentage-wise efficient than a bus that's only holding 5 people.
Yeah. And as far as reliability, David, what if I'm running a transit agency with 1,000 buses? How do I know how reliable are the shuttles versus just typical diesel or alternative
Sure.
vehicles?
Well, First off, I would say complexity. So as a guy who likes to build vehicles, like if you've ever taken apart and rebuilt a gas engine or a diesel engine, you realize there's literally dozens and dozens into the hundreds of parts, right? Well, if you repeat that over an entire fleet, that's a lot of maintenance on a lot of things that require fluids and lubricants and things like that, right? That's the reason why they have a lot of maintenance needs for those types of vehicles. Our vehicle being an electrical vehicle doesn't require as much of that complexity, both in the build, in the engineering, and in the servicing. Aside from that, now that's just me being a car guy, that's where my head goes first. But aside from that, we the way we deploy sort of mitigates some aspect of those risks as well. In that we lease the vehicles to what we like to call our community partners rather than clients. We lease the vehicles to them. And in that lease, maintenance, insurance, what we call a safety steward, which is the person in the loop maintaining and watching over the vehicle. All of that is included in a lease. And so if you have an issue and there is any sort of issue, we're able to swap that out and keep the route moving to where the fleet is able to maintain operations, and we'll just take that vehicle off, service it, test it, and redeploy it. And so we're able to keep the fleet operations as much as possible very reliable and very serviceable to the end users. Because to me, that falls under my category of that's more of a user perception issue. Because if you have tons of reliability issues or vehicles are constantly gone because of maintenance, to the end user, like, well, why would I use that?
Correct. Yeah. So we typically
very
run.
Important.
Yeah. So you brought an excellent point, David. So for the shuttle programs that we run, we typically have a ratio of 2 spares per 10 buses, let's just say.
Right.
Right. So with this being brand new, I'm not sure what the ratio will be, but that's typically.
It's about the same, actually. It's pretty close. Yeah.
Got it.
It depends on where it's deployed. Obviously, inclement weather and stuff like that, we want to make accounts for that.
And as far as the acceptance, again, by the users, is there a way that it could be hybrid between a human interaction and the autonomous vehicles, or it has to be fully autonomous? So
that's a great question, and I can unpack that, being that I mentioned the safety story, because that's primarily what they're there for. On the initial deployment, especially since we're so new, we are deploying with the safety steward, and the safety steward is actually in the vehicle, right? So
the safety steward will be a driver, pretty much?
A driver, and then when he's not engaged with the driving operations, he's more like a mobile concierge. Actually, we make the joke internally quite often, but it's relevant, is it took 50 years for people to get used to a self-driving elevator. They just liked having the guy there pressing the button, right? The elevator is doing all the work for most of the bulk of that time. And so what we have is our horizontal elevator, right, that we call the Mozee vehicle. And like, we just want that guy in there pressing the button because it makes people feel more invited and friendly. It's that friendly face that you probably, if you're using the route often, start to get a rapport with and stuff like that. So the safety steward serves that purpose as well. Again, being that design guy, I'm thinking about user perceptions and experiences. One thing that Mozee's been recently very committed towards is hiring veterans for those positions. Retired veterans, retired law enforcement, so they can handle not only the operations and stuff like that. In the case of incident, they can be first responder, they can be CPR trained, they can help with de-escalation. Like I said, with those rival team members, those Cowboys fans, man, they're staunch fans here in the Texas area. But the point is like, by having these people who know how to encounter and deal with these situations with positive outcomes, we see that as an inherent value rather than putting the human in the loop in some teleoperation center away from the vehicle and then having them remote control drive it in case of an incident, right? it's not that that's a bad thing. If you have the money to do that, a lot of companies do that. One, to be lean, and two, for user perception. We just don't see the value in spending that kind of money.
Got it. And as far as the acceptability from towns, and again, like DOT and the pretty much like DOT, what are the barriers to entry for most cities and states and regulatory agencies?
So here in Texas, we don't seem to have as many barriers. It's very autonomous friendly. There are quite a few autonomous companies testing here in Texas, mostly in delivery and freight. They're doing a lot of big testing, and they're getting a lot of leeway. But the thing is they're also doing great work. That same type of leeway has also been extended our way, in so much that our CEO, Sean Takerton, that I mentioned earlier, sits on the board for all things autonomous, land, air, and sea for TxDOT. So he sits on that board, and he's there to discuss and create regulation around any automated vehicle, land, air, and sea. So like for us, it's not that difficult because we have a voice, right at the top saying what makes sense and things like that. Now, we're not going to do anything that doesn't overall progress the, how should we say, what makes sense in this industry. And as such, we've even recommended that certain regulations that would make, I would say, this niche much more robust. We've made that's more work for us too. But the thing is that's what makes sense for the industry, for the public to have this, new kind of mobility that is safe and scalable and, able to service the communities that we serve, and that's more our goal, I think, than being entirely profit motivated. We're a business, and obviously that's a factor, but we are really passionate about solving these problems.
Got it. And David, as far as the opportunities for startups and for other sort of entrepreneurs to sort of collaborate on this sort of movement of autonomous shuttles, autonomous vehicles, what is your vision on where Mozee might have opportunities for companies to partner up with you or with other autonomous vehicles, whether it's workforce development on training technicians, repairing the vehicles? Is it like what do you foresee here?
Well, I can actually start, before I get too much into the vision, I'm going to start with the foundations that we're currently building right along those lines. We're working with UTA and UTD to kind of shape the minds that are going to help us build this type of mobility ecosystem in the future, right? Not only on like the computer science side, because that seems to be the most obvious place to go, but we're talking to various different forms of engineering as well. And they also have like automotive technician schools at both of the at UTA, as well as we've talked with Texas A&M and their automotive school to talk about what does the vehicles of the future need from a service and maintenance standpoint, and how can you get out in front of that and train, the next generation of those technicians. Now, that's important to us for a couple of reasons. I mean, it's not entirely unselfish because we do have service and maintenance as a part of our lease, right? So we want to be able to have competent and very skilled technicians on our side to be able to offer those services as best as we can. But we also come with quite a bit of tribal knowledge in the development of this specific type of vehicle that a lot of these younger minds haven't been exposed to. So to me, if we're talking vision, one, we can create a sense that these are just as regular cars are in not only to the public perception, but to the people who would come and work for us, right? They see the vehicle and they're like, yeah, I know that. And they would be very comfortable with, having these in their community, knowing that at some point that might be something they want to work on,
Got it. But then let's just say you guys deployed 1,000 units in New York, right? You guys going to need a bunch of technicians. Do you guys foresee having dealerships in metropolitan markets, or?
We were looking at it more as being that we're a lease, a dealership model doesn't quite make sense, but it is adjacent to a dealership model in that we would have deployment centers. And then some of the safety stewards could also, as they're cycling in and out with the needs of the fleet, they could also be technicians. As a matter of fact, some of the ones that we've already started interviewing, they already have a mechanical background and are very familiar with working on vehicles. And some of them, even in so much as electric vehicles, like, there's quite a few electric vehicles out there, and that workforce is actively shifting to being very tech savvy in that way. And so to us, being able to utilize multifunctional and like cross-platform functional people and put them at these deployment centers. And then there also are eyes and ears out there, and they can tell us, here's things that we think would be better here. Here's some features that we hear as we're deploying, right? That has been kind of the core of how we see deployment at scale as we start to little context. We have so much demand in the DFW area that we know that we could start here, meet our revenue goals, and then templatize all those different use cases. So that's what we're doing now. And so in the next, I'd say 3 years, that's the primary goal. Service the DFW area in the demand that we have here. Scale within our backyard, because this is a massive metro complex. I don't know if you ever had a chance to stop by. If you ever do, I'll buy you barbecue. So, but we know that there's almost every kind of use case available to us here to learn from, and it's close by, so we can go experience it ourselves. Then once we know what that looks like, we'll start to templatize and spread that out and adjust accordingly.
Got it. And as far as the timeline, what if you had the crystal ball? Because I had vehicles, I got gentlemen here and industry leaders, whether they're from Fortune 1000 companies or other sort of leaders in the autonomous vehicle space and flying cars. Everybody has a timeline. Mm-hmm. What is your crystal ball for Mozee and just your overall vision on when we're going to be fully autonomous, especially with autonomous shuttles?
So can I unpack that question a little bit? I get this a lot at conferences, right? And it's one of my favorite questions. But here's the context that I need established so I can properly address the question. When we're talking about fully autonomous, we have a prescribed 5 levels of autonomy. And typically when we say full autonomous, we're talking about something definitely over level 3, because that's like what Tesla self-driving is like 3, kind of bordering on level 4. And most companies that consider level 4 the start of something that's a true full self-driving vehicle. In level 5 is there is no need. The technology does everything, right? Here's the context that I add. With a little bit of like flippant joking, because I've been in the autonomy industry for a while. It's always 10 years out.
And sorry to interrupt you, David. So you're saying level 3 is with what you guys call, what is that you guys use it?
Well, like that's your advanced driver assistance features, ADAS, right? Where you have like adaptive cruise. GM, I think, did a great job with their Cadillac products and having an adaptive cruise control that did a form of self-driving. Tesla clearly is the market leader with a full self-driving technology. And on hardware 3 of Tesla, I'm saying it's a 3.5, level 3.5, not quite a 4. Now in hardware 4, it's tiptoeing on that border a little bit. But as I said, when you talk with people in the autonomous industry, it's always 10 years out. That's what they always say. And what I say is, if we have the constant need for humans to have the control that they want to have, we will never truly achieve level 5. It'll be level 4.1, 4.2, 4.9999. You know what I'm saying? And so this is always a question of what is the stage gate and what technology needs to be in place before we truly let go and let the robot take over completely for a true level 5. As far as the ability to have level 4, we have that now. We have companies that are right on that line deploying that now. The technology that we have, we're going to test at what I would say is a very confident level 3 with level 4 capabilities, because we're very new. We have the burden of proof and get some mileage on us to show that our technology is ready for prime time. And that's just us trying to be as safe as we can.
Got it. So just to talk about the elephant in the room here. So with Waymo, are you saying that, let's just say, is it fair to assume they're level 4 or they're level 5 already?
No, they're not level 5. They have teleoperations. And again, that is due care. They're trying to make sure to stay safe and have something in case of incident or traffic or something. Someone could take over and manage that situation very effectively, and make sure that, if you have passengers in the car, especially, that the passengers are getting to their destination safe and comfortably, let alone all the cars it's interacting with. But the thing is again, I don't see that they require teleoperations, because their technology has actually been proven with millions of miles driven every year to be pretty darn good. But at the same time, I don't foresee them getting rid of those teleoperations anytime soon. One, it's a regulatory requirement still. And two,
Sorry, David, for the listeners, the teleoperations is what?
where they can remote control the car from some operation center in the area. So they're literally remote control from their computer kind of thing. I mean, to bring it to a rudimentary level, yeah. But the idea there is that there will constantly be a human, even at level 4. You have a human in the loop, right? And that human in the loop is vital to the user perception aspect, right? Knowing that if something even minor goes awry, there's still someone who can fix it. Level 5 kind of takes that off the table.
Got it. So going back to your timeline, how will you, now that you give us a little bit more context, how will you describe that question? I mean, is it 3 years? Is it 5 years?
As long as it would take for humans to not require the trust of other humans. They have to trust the machine implicitly. Now, what I would say to that is, the best way to achieve that is to create an experience so transparent and ubiquitous to daily life, sort of solving the utility of mobility in such a way that it's seamless and invisible in its use. At that point, that's when level 5 will truly take over. And now, do I have a timeline? I would say that if we're thinking of it in a Raymond Kurzweil type of situation, the singularity is approaching quickly, and we're in that sort of logarithmic peak of technology, especially with the rise of various forms of AI and digital cognition and things like that. If I had to guess, within 20 years.
20 years?
Within 20 years.
To get to level 5?
to get to true level 5.
Really?
Yes.
I thought this was around the corner.
But you got to understand is regulatory moves, public perception moves slow. Regulatory moves 10 times slower than that.
Hmm.
And what I'm talking about is you're asking for a very deep cultural shift because it's got to happen in the mindset of the end users.
Yeah, but so like, for example, for private campuses that, you're not driving on highways, you're driving at low speeds, you could probably create sort of like an individual.
Sure. Like a closed circuit kind of situation. Right. Yep.
Are those still 20 years from now? Or are those more
Yes.
like 5? Really?
And I can tell you why. Having sold insurance for a decade before getting into cars, I can tell you why. You don't have the ability to assign liability to a robot. And so because of that, what happens is that you have the need to say, oh, no, I did the risk mitigation by having this human in the loop, whether it's on the vehicle or in a teleoperation situation. They're going to take care of it if anything happens to de-risk me, and now I'll pay for being the forebearer of the liability. But if you give that all to level 5 to the robot, that doesn't go away. So until we can figure out a construct that makes sense for that, which I don't think we're any closer than when I started this industry, and what I hear a lot is more of it's not a risk mitigation situation. It's more of a well, if you're the one that wants this, you're going to pay for the risk and the liability. And of course, the person that's getting it is like, well, I thought I was de-risking or eliminating the risk by adopting this new technology. And it's kicked down, the can keeps getting kicked down the lane, so to speak, with regards to that. And so as those conversations tend to be very cyclical, they don't progress very quickly. Well, that also underpins regulatory. And so these conversations wind up being a lot of echo chambers. And when the echo chambers finally get broken, you're left with confusion before somebody with a very clear understanding of what they're doing stands up as the voice of reason. Having interacted with these types of institutions, that's what I see with regard to these kinds of technologies. Now, other things are super efficient. They know exactly, and it's the law of large numbers. We don't have enough numbers to truly base this on, so it's pure speculation at this point. Not compared to, just in North America alone, per day, it's like 14 million miles a day are driven. Like that, we don't have anywhere near, even with Waymo deploying in so many cities, in so many different autonomous companies, and Teslas are doing a lot of stuff driving now. We still are at decimal points of percentage of what human drivers have done that do daily, let alone done in a legacy span of time.
Got it. It's an excellent point, David, because I'm thinking for a lot of the bus operators and transit agencies that are listening to this, including myself, I'm always super skeptical that we're going to have a major disruptor that is completely going to knock out a lot of the private bus operators, a lot of the private bus companies, transit agencies, to completely going into the autonomous space. So based on your perspective, it's like the winter time is going to be here at one point, but it's not, from what I'm hearing from your perspective, it's more like 5 to 20 years out.
That's fair. Yeah. And what I would say is to those transit operators is there's two ways of perceiving it. And it's either faith or fear. And technically they're both a belief in something that does not exist yet. Right. And so what you have there is, if you're a transit operator and you're afraid of whatever this disruptor could be, then you need to get out in front of that and innovate yourself. But if you see it as faith, you work with the innovators, and it's less work for you, and it actually makes you better. And that's the kind of the standpoint that we at Mozee try to take. We work with the different transit agencies. We work with the cities. We figure out their needs. And we're not trying to replace things like Uber. Uber serves a great purpose in society that we're not trying to disrupt. But we can make it to where Uber gets people from the Dallas Cowboys Stadium to the actual Uber pickup zone a lot faster and more efficient, to where they're avoiding traffic in that condensed area, just as an example analogy, right? So there's a way that we can move forward with faith and believe in the same positive potential outcomes rather than in fear and constantly be at loggerheads. You know what I mean? And as a philosophy within Mozee, that's part of the reason why we've been able to command audiences where a lot of other companies might not. And I'm willing for other companies to try out our way of doing things, because I think we'll all overall benefit.
Got it. Cool. So unfortunately we run out of time, but it was
It's all good.
one of the best episodes we had so far. So I appreciate you jumping in and being generous, sharing your innovations here. So just to wrap up, like, what is the best business advice that you ever gotten so far?
The best business advice is when I first got hired by Local Motors. I didn't go to school, by the way, for design. I got educated at a community college on the basics, as it were. I got, an AA and didn't know what I was going to do. Decided to sell insurance. Got really, really lucky, right? With some people that really believed in my capabilities. But I had imposter syndrome like a mother, man. I was so scared that I was going to fail because there's a really big deal. I was a family man already, a lot on the line. My boss at the time, who's now one of our development partners, a guy named Alex Victor, he told me, he's just like, you were brought here for a certain skill set that we know is a raw material. You get the opportunity to refine it, but you can't refine the raw material unless you fire it, right? He's a mechanical engineer, so he likes like welding and stuff like that. And so he's like, so you got to refine the raw material in the fire, and then you're going to forge it into a tool. That's what you're here for. And he's just like, in addition to that, if you can do that with authenticity rather than fake it till you make it, you're going to be in a better position. And what's interesting is that was in 2014. I was director of design by 2018. From a guy that shouldn't have even been there on paper to director of design in 4 years. And I still hold true to what he said there. Is at any time I feel like I might be out of my depth, back in the fire, I'm going to hammer this into a tool. And so that's really stuck with me.
That's awesome. And David, what is your best book recommendations? Your top 1 or 2 book recommendations?
I was a big fan of the book called Play Bigger, which was around the discipline of category design. Big fan. Not the least of which is I got to meet the category design guys who wrote the book shortly after reading the book. So that was really, really nice. But what was great about it is it talks about this discipline, and it's a discipline that I kind of was practicing in an organic fashion, but it was still very esoteric, and I wasn't aware of the potential the category design yields. And so by reading the book, it crystallized a lot of that and put it into a construct that is now repeatable and scalable. And not only that, I followed it up with 22 rules of category design, which is a workbook of how you do it. So it's like those 2 books were great. Other than that, I just got done doing the How to Build a Car by the F1 engineer Adrian Newey, and it's a delightful book of just a bunch of his stories of building race cars. But he also talks about like what it takes to be at the top of your field and being at the cutting edge of something. And that's something that that resonated really well. And I'd like to think that at some point in my career, if I'm not already, I want to get there. You know what I mean? So that's inspirational in that way.
There you go. David, mainly known for Nemo. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure having you in the episode in our podcast tonight. How can listeners stay in touch with you?
So you can primarily find me on LinkedIn, David Scott Neal II. Sounds like I wrote a book. You can find me on Instagram as Nemo Junglist. And you can find Mozee at mozee.official on Instagram. And we will have a lot of content from some of our recent adventures. That's really, really fun and engaging, and seeing all the smiles on the faces of the people that we interact with. So yeah, follow us on there.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. Well, again, thank you again for all the listeners for tuning in today. Great episode today. If you have an upcoming ground transportation program where you need shuttle services or now autonomous vehicles, please contact us and please follow David as well as Mozee. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Hey everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed the episode and got some valuable insights. If you're curious to learn more, head over to the resource website at dpvtransportation.com, where we got a ton of useful resources and tools for you to stay ahead of the game. And before we wrap it up, I want to invite you to book a free gas emission consultation or a consultation about your ground transportation program with us. Just register on our website is a fantastic way to see how your fleet is doing or how your overall program could be improved. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll catch you next time on the future of ground transportation. Have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in to the future of ground transportation. We appreciate you coming along for the ride. If you found value in this episode and want to hear more, please make sure to subscribe to the show.